Today, I'm going to do another SwiftUI project based on the Udemy course by Todoey. This is called Todoey. This is a to-do list application. And the reason I wanted to do this is because, one, my friend asked me, and two, it comes right after the SwiftUI module, and it seems to be one good app to learn kind of a little bit different things about SwiftUI. So let's go ahead and get started. And, as we start, normally, as everything we do, iOS application, and we'll go ahead and click on Next. Project name, we'll call it Todoey Swift UI. And obviously, we'll do whatever organizational identifier you want to use. Interface will be SwiftUI, language is Swift. And I think in the end, we do core data in this course, but we're going to leave it unchecked for now because we can manually add core data elements into this particular project. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And we'll go ahead and save it in my app dev. And one thing I think most of you know, I mentioned in the last video, is I do generally like to change my content views so that they are representative of the view that I'm working on. And so we'll just start with that. So again, control click. And we're going to refactor this, and we're going to rename this. And I will call it to-do list view. One thing I do want to mention is this will be a multi-part video. I don't expect that I will get this all done today. So what we'll do is let's go ahead and I'm just put a couple comments in here on what I will try to cover. So one, creating the list of items, the to-do items. I'd like to be able to get the navigation bar. So I am going to try to follow the Udemy course pretty closely and try to do everything that they do. So I think there is a navigation element into this. So one of the things they do in the thing is to toggle a checkbox, and we're not going to do that mainly because the implementation that they have where it's changing attribute of a reusable cell, one, doesn't work here, and two, it just doesn't make sense in the long run. That's something, obviously you'd rather store the state of your to-dos rather than having it as a toggle on a checkbox. So we're actually going to skip this portion because I think later on we end up using user defaults and core data to accomplish this, and I assume we're going to probably make a more data structure out of our list of items to store all that stuff. All right, so we'll toggle checkbox. So we're not going to do that. Navigation bar, we're going to create an add pop-up to add new items. And if we get to this, again, this will be a multi-part video depending on how long this goes. I want to keep my videos a little bit shorter now. And maybe we will get to using user defaults. But if not, this will be in this next video. Not next video. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So obviously we have our to-do list view. Here we go. And one of the things we want to start off with is obviously we want to replicate a to-do list. And so if we kind of look at what we have here, different types of views, let's look at list. Let's read about a list. A container that presents rows of data arranged in a single column, optionally providing the ability to select one or more members. All right, perfect. That sounds really great. And in this example, they have a struct called ocean, a couple different names of an ocean, and then you can list the oceans and just list the oceans with the names. And for this example, I think the Udemy course starts with an array of just kind of to-do list items. So we'll start there, and then hopefully we get into creating a struct around this. But let's start with the list. And so I will drag this list right here up in this VStack. As you can kind of tell, we're going to be doing a VStack. It kind of makes sense, right? We have a list of items. And you can kind of see that once I put the list in here, we have our content item here and our images down here and a bunch of space in there. So it looks like it's, what we want. So let's go ahead and get rid of this padding. Let's go ahead and get rid of these extra items here. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's copy this. Copy the text, sorry. And let's put it in here just so we can see kind of what it looks like if we have, we'll just do 3 of them, and then we'll remove these. We don't need this part here. Let's see what this looks like. All right, so this is kind of a list, a to-do list. Works well. Let me just put a 2 and a 3 here just to make sure that it's actually 3 different elements and not just repeating the same one. So that looks pretty good in terms of a list. So next, what we want to do is we probably want to start, we want to add, so we want to use the list view. We created the list view, and let's go ahead and, actually I'm going to change this around. We'll do the navigation bar first, or next, and then we'll come back to number 1 by reading to an array. So there's actually, if we take a look in here, navigation, you can see that they have a couple items here. Navigation link, I don't think that's what we want. Split view, I don't think so either. Navigation stack makes sense. We have a navigation view as well. So a view for presenting a stack of views that represents a visible path in a navigation hierarchy. Okay, that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and put this navigation view in here. I assume later on there is going to be some sort of click in to each of the items or some sort of category, because otherwise there's no point in kind of having a navigation view if it's just a single view, right? And I'm actually okay with this, being able to, do some work and then edit it and then go back, because in the real world, in the agile process, you're going to do some development and then later on you're going to have to go back and redo it, or requirements will change and you'll have to make some changes. So this is very kind of indicative of, in my opinion, real world development, where you don't have all the time in the world to make the perfect application, make it, don't repeat yourself, make it dry, things like that. And so sometimes you'll see that I develop in a very, there's some corners, so-called corners that I'll cut because of that. All right, so let's cut this VStack. I'm going to put it in the navigation view right here. And that way we can embed this in the navigation view. And I think before we get too far, even though the preview looks good, let's just see what it looks like when I compile it. I also need to do this because my computer's kind of slow and it does take a little while to build. So it's going to take a while to attach. But if it's okay with this navigation view, I think the next thing is the navigation bar will need to add some, like a title, right? So navigation bar and a title. So let's see what the simulator says. It's still loading. And again, we have this plist error. Everything looks good here, all right? So plist contains no UI scene configuration dictionary, looking for configuration name, no name. So again, this is just one of those weird SwiftUI bugs, where in the info.plist, it is basically looking for something called scene configuration. Not sure why it needs it. I'm not sure why it's complaining about it, but if we stop it and we go back, now we have our info plist with our application scene manifest. If we build it again, this error should go away. All right, so we're so far so good. So in this navigation view, there are some things we can do with it. So within that view, we want to give it a title, right? So for this, let's see what we can do. Let's do a navigation title. And actually, let me go back just so everybody can see kind of what came up in the main menu. So when you push period, it gives you a lot of options on what you can do. So there's on tap gestures, navigation title, font, padding. So for us, navigation title configures the view's title for purposes of navigation using a string binding. Looks good to me. So the title, we're going to call it Todoey. All right. And then we'll refresh the view and see what it looks like. And if that looks good, I think we can actually, all right, so good. So we have a navigation bar, we have a navigation title. So the next one we talked about was creating kind of a checkbox, right? So again, I don't think the way they did it in the Udemy video using checkbox attributes makes a lot of sense, but we do definitely want a checkbox. So what we'll do as a placeholder for now is let's add in a checkbox over here. So under this list, basically right, to the right of these, I want to add a checkbox. So we're going to put this in a horizontal stack, H stack, right? And we'll do the hello world title in the horizontal stack. And right after it, we're going to do an image. And I've already looked up a couple, images I like. But, if you look at the images that are out there using SF images and things like that, one of them is called square shape. And I got to put it in double quotes, right? And then I'll close off my H stack. So let's see what this looks like. Let's see if this renders the way I think it will. Okay, so perfect. So we have a little bit of a button there, but it's obviously too close. And then if these, are different lengths, it's going to look very strange. So let's just play that out. So let's say if we have this, and then I don't want to just H stack, and let's move this over here. We'll do an image. Instead of retyping, I'll copy paste and close it out. So let's see what this looks like. All right, so this looks kind of weird in the sense that the checkboxes are in weird spots. So we have two choices. We could move the checkbox to the front, but to be true to kind of the application that the appending class is doing, let's move it to the end over here. So what we'll do is we'll just put a spacer. And spacers are pretty useful in SwiftUI. It just gives kind of fills all that space. So there you go, right? So that looks pretty good. All right. Okay, so we're not going to toggle the checkbox, but I'm definitely going to put it in here. And I'm not going to keep doing this because eventually we're going to have to do a loop into looping through the array. So let's see. So the next thing is let's go ahead and try to decide which makes more sense. Let's do our array of items. All right, so in the Udemy video, there is a let item array. Oops, I meant to do it in the struct. Let item array. And we will, let's see, I like the Lord of the Rings, so we're going to do array of strings. These are array of Todoey items. Let's do the Fellowship of Rings. 2 towers, and we will do Return of the King. All right. So we have our item array, and it's a let, so it's not a variable. We can't modify it. And what we'll do is we will go ahead and loop through this item array in this horizontal stack. So we're just going to replace all these texts with the right items. All right, so let's get rid of these two. We don't need all these. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a for each. So in our list, for each, a structure that computes views on a demand from an underlying collection of identified data. Perfect. So for each, we're going to say 0 to less than the item array dot count. So if you recall from previous lessons, the first element in an item array is 0, and the last item is always the number of items minus 1, right? So this for each will loop from 0, and in my case, there are 1, 2, 3 items. So it'll go 0 to 2 because of this less than. We're not going to hit the 3. So here we go. For item array dot count, we're going to say for each item in, we're going to do this H stack in here. All right. All right. So let's see what happens. So if I hit tab, let's see if it complains. Okay. So here's the challenge, right? So this says non-constant range. Argument must be an integer literal. So what that means is basically that because this is could change, it wants to actually look for a specific ID. And later on, when you change to a strut, or when we change it to a strut, I'm going to assume we're going to put an ID in there. But for now, you can kind of shortcut this by doing an ID, and it's going to be itself in the ID. And this should fix this issue temporarily. Again, you know, an array of items storing a to-do list is not the best way of implementing this, but it should be okay. So for now, it looks like everything is good, right? So we have a count, and in our text, we're just repeating it 3 times. So we know the number is accurate, right? We have 3 here. This is looping through 3 times. So what we're going to do is we're just going to change this text to item array, and we'll call it item. So this item here is basically the index, and it'll index around each of these items. So there you go. Now we have the fellowship, 2 towers, return the king. Again, let's run this app, make sure everything looks good. Even though preview looks good, doesn't hurt to always just run the app every once in a while. All right, so far so good. So we have our list of items from the array. And I think the other thing is, it has to be clickable. So we want to be able to click it. And I think when we click it, the idea is that the toggle, the checkbox will toggle. But again, we're not going to do this. I think eventually, later on, we're going to have to do some, an if-then statement here to change the image. So I should put a comment in there. If-then to change which image we use. So my hope is that once we touch it, eventually we'll get to the point where we'll alter a Boolean called is completed or something like that, and it will just change this image from square shape to another image called, let's call it, I think it's called checkmark square. So let's just copy this down. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Checkmark square fill. All right, so let's redo our preview and see what this looks like. All right, so my hope is that we will be able to kind of toggle between these two. And we could pick different images. Maybe we'll pick something different. But the hope is that we'll be able to toggle between the two. So I'll comment this out just so we have it for the future, for future reference. All right, so now we're able to read from the array. We're able to get our list, which is what we want. The last thing I want to do is number 4 here, is create an add pop-up to add new items. And then I think I'm going to stop after this, and in the next video, we'll start using more persistent storage like user defaults. All right, so next part here is let's go ahead and add, oh, I'm sorry, we haven't finished. We want to make this clickable. All right, so one of the things that you can do is we could use something called on tap gesture. So for after the H stack, we could do something like on tap gesture, and we can, let's say, print, we'll just print at the console, the name right here. That's what we want. Let's see if we can return this name. Okay, so that's the hope, that we on tap for each of these items, we can print this array. No, I'm sorry, print the item of the array. Let's see what it looks like. All right, so we have it here. I want to click. Oh, nothing happened. What if I click the characters? Oh, there you go. The fellowship. So it's working. It's coming back. 2 towers. Return of the king. But here and here, kind of this white area doesn't work. What if I have an image here? The fellowship. Okay, that looks good. So there's 2 challenges. The spacer here is not clickable, number 1. Number 2, it doesn't really respond the way I'm hoping when someone clicks on a button. Like, there's no visual indication that I've actually clicked on this. So one thing we can do, which is the way I like to do it, is let's put this into a button. And then that way we have more control over what this button's going to look like. So inside this H stack, let's do a button. So this button is going to be take this text item array, and the label, I'm sorry, this will be the action, right? So this is the action that the button will happen. And then over here, we're going to do I'm going to cut this out now. We're going to do a label. And in this label, it will have the text array of the item name. Then we'll put the spacer in, then we'll put the image name as well. And that will make the whole thing a button. And then on this button, we're going to just do this. We'll print the item array. And later on, I think we'll eventually toggle checked, right? So we'll figure out how to toggle the checked there. So let's get rid of this on tap gesture over here. Let's see what this looks like now. All right, so everything looks like it's loading. Let's click around. Fellowship, 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 fellowship. Good. 2 towers working. Return to the king also working. So that's great, and you can kind of see the visual indication, a little bit of fadeness when you see me touch this. So great. I think that's actually working out pretty well. So finally, the last thing, and we'll do this in the next video, is let's add the pop-ups to add a new item. So in the Udemy video, in the navigation, you were able to add a button. So same thing in SwiftUI, you can actually drop in a toolbar. And in this toolbar, we can do many things. Oops. Close the curly brace for me already. So in the toolbar, we can actually, let's add a button. I'm going to call the button add. All right, let's see what this looks like. Let's see if this renders properly. Oh, there we go. Perfect. There's an add button. We could also do a plus if you like that, but I find it kind of small and hard to read. So we can also be even more explicit. We say add item. Right? So now you can add a new item. And the way button works, as you kind of saw up top, first you have, this is the action. So whatever action in here, action of the button is right here. All right. So we are going to actually add a new item. And the way this works in SwiftUI is that we will use something called alert. So alert presents an alert when a given condition is true using a localized string for the title. All right, so basically we're going to do an alert with, probably it's going to say add item, is presented. So this is a Boolean that's binding, and basically it says whether or not we're showing this alert. So let's just go ahead and start doing this. Add item, and we'll do is presented, and we need a binding Boolean. So let's say showing add item alert. Let's make it explicit. I like to be explicit with my variable names. This is going to complain. I haven't created this variable. We'll worry about that later. So actually, let's just go up and make that variable. So up here, we're going to create a new state variable. And again, I won't go into property wrappers in this video. Maybe I'll set something else up and talk about the different property wrappers. But a state variable is used primarily within the view. And if you read Apple's documentation, they recommend that state variables be private variable. And we will call it, I think I said what, showing this. Oh, now I regret making the variable name so long, but let's just show item alert. And this will be false. So basically when we start, we will not be showing any item alert. All right. So generic parameter A cannot be inferred. So we will take care of all these issues in a minute. It's primarily, I think, because I haven't finished putting everything in here. So what will happen is we'll have a text field, and we'll call it add item. And the text, we're going to store the text. This is a binding string, so we're going to call it new item. And again, it's going to complain because I haven't actually created that variable yet. So here we go. We got to have a button. Call it OK. Maybe call it add. Action will be add new item. So the action on a button like this is to call a separate function, a void function, to actually do the execution of whatever happens after we add the button. So let's go up here and I want to create that new item variable. So another state variable, new item, and we will initialize it to nothing because we don't want anything in there. And then again, this is going to complain because this action is not a real function yet. So within the struct, we're going to kind of create a new function called function add new item, no parameters, returns void. And what we'll do is print you entered item. All right. So you entered new item. So what's going to happen here is it will go ahead and let's see if I did this right. Okay, that error went away. And this toolbar is still complaining about my trailing closure. So because I started the toolbar here at the button, but did not close my toolbar, I believe. So let me see if that was the issue. No, that is not the issue. So it is complaining about something. So let's take a look at what the error is. Consecutive items. Okay, it just did not like this trailing closure part. Okay, I see. So here, let's see if I can do, let's add an action here. So let's do showing alert toggle. Showing add item alert toggle. Let's see if that gets rid of some of the errors. Nope, this still does not like my toolbar. So trailing closure passed to a parameter of type visibility that does not conform, does not accept the closure. So I must be doing something where I am inputting a closure that it does not like. So again, this is kind of, I guess this is, for me, it's kind of fun and interesting to try to figure out exactly what I did wrong. It could be that the toolbar, I have put something incorrect in the syntax of it, or potentially the button, the showing add item toggle is not working, but it does not like this whole portion of this toolbar. So let me comment out this piece first. And that way I can kind of see a little bit better at a high level, potentially maybe what I'm doing wrong. So it's re-rendering. It doesn't mind. So toolbar is gone, but it's okay with the button when I put it here. All right. And I have the showing add item alert. And let's see if we can toggle that. See if that works. I'm going to add things in until I can get this thing to work correctly. So it may not be liking this something that I'm doing here in this alert area, but this should be working correctly. So let's see. I see. It's because I'm missing a curly brace. So the alert also needs to have items inside it. So the alert, you then modify things inside a closure for the alert. So let's go text field. And this should be okay now. All right. So sometimes it's hard to, because of SwiftUI, just the number of curly braces and everything like that. Sometimes it's hard. So this still doesn't like something I'm doing. So it's because I have this button here, and I have one too many parentheses. So that looks like it's working. So let's just take a look at what's going on. Let's go ahead and hit play, or build, excuse me. And all right, so we have our add button. We can still touch these. We get the right items, and we hit add item. Our alert comes up. It says add item, like we had over here, text field. This is going to be our new item. And in the text field, I also have the, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. But you can kind of see I have add item in here. So this is the placeholder text. This is kind of the alert box. So let's say hello. And we'll hit OK. Let's see what happens. You entered hello. Perfect. So it entered in. We're also getting an error because it's complaining that our auto sizing constraints, it's managed by UI collection, is not supported. It'll result in incorrect cell sizing. So we'll figure that error out a little bit later in a later video, but I just want to get the functionality in here so we can see how it works. But we've entered the new item. Let's actually make this more explicit. So please type in a new item. We'll just make that more explicit in there. And let's try again. Let's take a look. Add item. Please type in a new item. Thank you. All right. So you entered thank you. Let's add another item. Oh, my text is still in there. So that's probably not a great user experience. Let's, we can, the Hobbit, right? You entered the Hobbit, but again, when I click on add item, text is still there. So that's pretty easy to fix, I think. Under add a new item, we've printed the item. Well, let's make sure we clear it out. New item equals, we'll just clear out the text, right? So that should work there. All right, now the last thing is we should, every time we add something, we should add it to the array, right? So what we have to do here is we have to change this array from a let, which is a constant, so to speak. And I'll comment this out in case anybody wants to kind of see it again. And I'll probably check in this, this piece as part 1 to my GitHub account, so you can follow along till we get here. I'll try to get the next video out as soon as I can, but I do have a day job, so I try to do these at night when I can. All right, so we're gonna do a state variable, and it's gonna be a state private variable, and we're gonna call this an item array. So now we have this as an item array, a variable. We should be able to append to it. So let's see if that works. So item array dot append, new element will be new item. All right. So hopefully this works. Let's see where we are. So I know in the Udemy course, after you append a new item, you had to reload your view and everything like that. Let's take a look. So click again, everything. I like to do a little regression testing, make sure everything's working right. Add a new item. The Hobbit. Okay. Hobbit. There we go. Let's add it. And boom, it adds. So entered it, it added it. And so it's actually one of the nice things about SwiftUI. When you add a new item to an array, it knows that the array is modified and it reloads that list view. So let's add another item. Cat. I don't know. And there you go. So it keeps adding up. But of course, as you know, the second I stop this and reload it, I'm only going to get the 3 items that I had to begin with, because we've loaded everything through an array, which will basically get destroyed when I swipe up, and then if I were to go back and load this Todoey app again, we're back to those 3 items because we're not keeping the state of these. We're not keeping persistent state of these items. So I think we're at a pretty good stopping point. I will just check this particular piece in just so everybody has it. I'll call it part 1. I'm going to try to get part 2 out, which is using user defaults, and I assume we're also gonna restructure this to not use an array, but potentially a more custom data structure, and finally probably use core data. I am a big fan of kind of using core data as a method of using persistent storage over Realm or some of the other pieces now that core data has gotten a little bit more mature. That's my personal design philosophy. Everybody else is obviously entitled to their own, but for me, I don't use CocoaPods as much. I use Swift Package Manager as it's become more mature and things like that. And so there you go. This is part 1. Hopefully I'll get part 2 out as soon as I can. I hope everybody enjoyed. Please leave a comment if you have any feedback. Thanks.